live.
Hello and welcome to the Twilight show on Friday 31st of May. I'm Maxine, and tonight for the second time I'll be focusing on the important, privileged and challenging role of head teacher. I'll be talking to Bex Owen about her first year as head of a primary school, chatting about our transition from deputy head to acting head and then to becoming the substantive head teacher.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, welcome, and it's fabulous to be here for the Twilight show this evening on Friday the 31st of May. If you're listening back to the podcast, welcome and thank you for downloading. It's great that you are here. Really, really great to see you and to hear you and you to be here and join us. And yes, tonight, like my last show, it's all about that important, privileged and immensely challenging role of head teacher. And tonight, I'm really excited to be joined by Rebecca Bex Owen, who's going to be talking about her first year as head of a fabulous primary school. And she's going to be talking about her transition from deputy head to acting head and then actually moving on to becoming the substantive head teacher. So brilliant, really, really exciting to be talking to Bex this evening. I'm going to be asking her about the high points of this last 12 months, of the challenges, and if she has any words of advice at all for new or aspiring head teachers or acting head teachers, anybody who is new to this, who's new to being a head. So I'm, of course, as some of you might know, or you might have read in my bio, a former head teacher myself, hence really being interested in this topic and wanting to talk a little bit more about headship. I was a head for 13 years in total. 2 different headships, both in the middle school sector. So those of you who are not from a 3-tier area, which will be most of you, that means the last 2 years of primary, year 5 and 6, and then the first 2 years of secondary, 7 and 8. That was my headship experience. 2 different schools, very different. One in a fairly large urban area and another in a small market town. Both fantastic schools, both immensely challenging. And really, 13 years of my life that I look back at now, and I think this was a really challenging job, and there were some things, our negative bias can drive us towards remembering the most challenging bits. But it's really interesting now looking back, and certainly thinking about preparing for this show, about some of the absolute really, really great, positive, superb things about being the head teacher. And I thinking about that purpose, thinking about, okay, not every day is a big day when you make immense changes, but thinking about looking back at those schools and some of the decisions that you make, seeing them have impacts and seeing things going well and seeing things that are working and children feeling safe and enjoying their school and learning and knowing that you've played a part in that. And it doesn't go right all the time, and we're all human. And we all make mistakes and we all make decisions that we probably would rather not necessarily have made. But it's a positive, it's a great job, and we are all human. So just a couple of things before we go in and before we join Bex and have a chat with her. Just thinking about that whole idea of purpose, and thinking really, about that making a difference, the impact of a head being so significant. There's so much to do. Getting the priorities right and delegating can be a huge challenge and a really steep learning curve that can present immense challenges. But having your own school is such an immense privilege. So it can be argued, and I said this a couple of weeks ago in my previous show about being a head teacher, that the head teacher is the person who has the single greatest impact on their school. And there is quite a lot of research about the impact of the head teacher. The head teacher can make key decisions, shape the future. They're a key part of the school culture. And we've spoken about that before. Head teachers aren't the only ones who influence school culture. Senior leaders, middle leaders, teachers, in fact, all staff, all the community, the students, even themselves. But the head teacher, it can be argued, plays the greatest part. So a couple of weeks ago, earlier this month, back in May, had the real privilege of speaking to Monique Berry, head teacher I had the privilege of working with in the autumn term of this academic year. And Monique spoke about her route to headship, about how she'd crossed phases. And she also spoke about how she encourages her staff to follow their own ideas and models that belief in lifelong learning, on developing herself and her team, encouraging her team to share their ideas and developing a vision. She talked about growing school culture based on collaboration and a real emphasis on the human side of headship, on building relationships, on being open and being honest as a leader. And it was really great to hear about the journey that Monique's school has been on and continues to be on, and how hard her team are working to raise standards, and how the community has really come closer, and how staff really now want to be there. And when I spoke to Monique, it was the end of SATS week. She must have been exhausted, a head teacher, a primary head at the end of SATS week. But it was so great to hear about how positively the children had approached those weeks and that test, and how that school culture was really coming together so superbly. So this evening, again, I'm going to be joined by Bex in just a minute, and I can see that Bex has joined us and she's ready. And like I said, headship, it's a job I look back on really fondly. You know, many challenges, but one where you can look back and see real impact of your work, of your decisions, of your own blood, sweat and tears, of the people that are also on that journey with you. And it is challenging, and much of it will be difficult, and we're all human, and not everything will be perfect. But it's a job where that purpose is clear, and where the rewards that are brought are absolutely second to none. So just while Bex gets herself ready and gets herself gathered and ready to have a chat with us, I'm just going to go really briefly and hear from our fabulous sponsors.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MATS leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
Okay, thank you. Great to hear from our sponsors there. And then I'm going to come to you now, Bex. Bex, thank you so much for joining us on a Friday evening at the end of half term. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. It's really, really nice to be able to join you because I'm very rested now.
And well, I think possibly you might have got a better week than Monique, who had the end of SAT week and then a days of head teacher immersion when I spoke to her.
Yeah, I did feel that for her when you said at the end of SATs week. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. She was great though. She was absolutely great. But it's wonderful. Thank you so much. Like I said, yes, you're well rested, but it is half term week and here we are talking all things headship. So thank you so much for joining me, Bex.
No problem.
And full disclosure, at the sort of beginning, I think of our conversation that we're going to have, just to say you also are not just joining somebody who is just a random Teachers Talk Radio. I am a governor at your school. I am chair of governors, and it's such a privilege to be the chair of governors at your school, Bex. I just wanted to say that at the beginning, just to get that out of the way before we move on.
Great.
It's great. So
Always good
thank
to
you.
say.
No, it is. It's such a privilege to work with us. So Bex, just a few things generally, just to sort of chat around. I wondered if you wouldn't mind just starting off, just telling us a few things about your background and your sort of history with Little Paxton, because it is a really fascinating one. And it's not the same as everybody who I would talk to as head of a school. So just a little bit about your background and your roots and your history with Little Paxton.
Yeah, that's no problem. And so I've always known that I was going to be a teacher. So from very small, apparently my parents used to say they used to find me in my room lining up my teddy bears and taking the register from when I was really tiny. So I knew that I wanted to go into teaching. So I did a lot throughout my kind of like education. Took lots of opportunities to like do things with children and to get involved with like after school clubs or brownies and just volunteering, so that I had lots to put on my personal statement. So I was already thinking from young, I want to go to university, I want to study to be a teacher. And I studied at King Alfred's in Winchester and did a 4-year BEd, which was brilliant. And then I actually was a pupil at Little Paxton. So I actually have returned to the school at which that made me who I am today, I guess. So I was always really passionate about the village and the community of Little Paxton. And it was the first school that I got a job at in my NQT year. So I wrote to them when I was finishing and just said, if you've got any jobs, think of me. And the head teacher emailed me an application pack really quickly. And went to look round, loved the school. And then that was 21 years ago. So after my NQT year, I just have ended up staying. And I think some people can say, oh, well, aren't you bored of the school? But actually, every time I thought maybe I'm ready to move on, there was an internal opportunity to progress my career. So I think I've done, I actually had to write it down because there were so many things that I did. So the first thing I started off doing was mentor, not, I was going to say just, but I'm really passionate about mentoring. So I mentored trainee teachers, and then an opportunity came up to lead Key Stage 1. Then there was an internal deputy head opportunity. And after COVID, I actually felt that didn't have the capacity to do the deputy head job well enough. So took the decision to apply for an internal job as a to lead teaching and learning and to be one of our phase leaders. So I looked after years 4, 5 and 6. And then there came 2 years later came an opportunity to become the deputy head again. And I think I did that from Easter 2023. And then September 23, I became acting head, then in the January interim head, and then April substantive head. So lots of career opportunities within one place.
Bex, that is such a fascinating story, and you know, in itself, one of the reasons why I was really, really keen to talk to you on Teachers Talk Radio. There's lots and lots there. So, first of all, I can that thing with the lining up of teddies and they're always going to be a teacher and that relentless playing of schools. I bet there are other people who are going to be listening to this who are teachers who can tell that story back from their own childhood. I bet you're not the only one with that. I can certainly relate to that. But being a pupil at the school that you then went on to teach at, and now you're actually going on to lead, that itself is absolutely fascinating. So how does that feel? How, when you walk in, you know, do you still have memories of how that school looked and smelt when you were a child? And now you see yourself in a different, you know, in that different seat. How does that feel?
I think at first it was really strange. So there were a few
Mm.
teachers that were there that had been teachers when I was a child there. So one particular teacher, Mrs. Barlow, who was one of my inspirations as a young child who wanted to be a teacher. I thought I would want to teach like her. I want people to remember me
Wow.
like she have the impact that she had on me as a pupil. And I actually got her job, so she was retiring and I took
Oh,
her job. So that seemed really lovely. But as I look around the school, there's parts of the school that are now inside that were actually they're actually like outdoor areas, or
okay.
the children's kitchen, or where we kept the animals, or so I think there's quite a lot of work that's gone on within the school building, so it doesn't look like it looked when it was a one form entry tiny little village primary school, because it's now two form entry, quite
Yeah.
a big building. But I can remember where my year 6 classroom was. When I walked the halls, I can remember which teacher was in which room from like years ago as well.
That's absolutely fascinating. I love the story about your inspiration from Mrs. Barlow and how you wanted to be like her, and then you ended up actually in her role and in her shoes almost
Mm.
doing that role.
Yeah,
I
and
think
she's actually been back. They so at Christmas we invited back all of the teachers and previous head teachers that were still around locally to our Christmas fair, because they hadn't been able to come in during the pandemic. So we'd lost touch with some of them. So she came back in, and I was like, "You're never going to guess what, Mrs. Barlow. I'm the head at the moment." and she, and she's like, "Oh, good."
yeah, I bet she wasn't surprised, Bex.
No, I don't think she was. I think I always got on my report is a really good at organising people, which I know means bossy.
Mm.
I know that.
I think it means bossy in a good way, Bex.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's good bossy. That's really interesting. So there were obviously always those signs then, or those signs that you were going on to great things with Little Paxton, or you know, just going on to great things when you were a pupil there yourself. You came back, you took on that role, and then you know you've done all these other things at Little Paxton, and it's really interesting that you talk about mentoring and you're so passionate about that. Key Stage 1 deputy head. And I think there are also many of us who can really, really hear you when you say how difficult things were through COVID. And you took that really brave decision actually to go and lead something that you feel passionate about in teaching and learning. So, in
Yeah.
many respects, just a sideways, just a different step and a bit of a change, I think.
And back with the children, I think, but in the pandemic, I'm sure lots of us, particularly those in leadership, struggled because you were kind of like set apart, because they were like, you need to keep
Yeah.
leading the school, so you can't lead a bubble, and it just felt so strange to be away from the children and like in your own room, so that you were kind of protecting yourself so you could lead the school if someone else wasn't there.
Yeah, and
So yeah,
I
it's
hear
very
you.
difficult.
I hear you, and that again, that's something that's really important to you. I think that mentoring and growing with the adults, but also being in there and being really close to the teachers
Yeah, I think
and
that
the children.
one of the things that I definitely am massively passionate about is when somebody comes and asks me, how do I do this? I can say, well, when I did that role that you're talking about, this is what I did. but they don't have to do it in the same way. But I think the staff know, because lots of them have hung around for a long time as well, that I've been in all those positions, and therefore I've got something to say about them, which gives me weight, I guess.
That's really, really interesting. And again, one of the reasons why some people may choose not to go and stay in one place for a long time, because people have seen them in that role and they found it hard to step out of it. But you've found that and used that in a really positive way.
Yeah, I think lots of people say, "Oh, you've been here for a long time. Have you done this?" And I'm like, "Yep, done that. Been there, got the t-shirt." I think one of the teachers found me in the first aid room the other day, and they're like, "This is the last place I thought I was going to find you, but here you are, getting a shoulder plaster."
And again, in primary, that just sort of credibility of having a bit of a go at doing everything can be really, really powerful, can't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So just thinking then to the sort of head teacher bit, yes, it has been quite a rapid rise. When you put the dates around that, Easter 2023, stepping into the deputy head role again, and and I have to say, from where I was sitting, doing an absolutely superb job of that, Bex, really moving things forward, really taking some of the works the school at the time was still judged requires improvement, and I know that there's been some big changes. School now is judged to be good, but the school was judged to be requires improvement. There was some rapid change needed with teaching and learning, which I recall you really doing. September 2023, unfortunately, then the substantive head was poorly, and you stepped up and you became acting head. So can we talk a little bit about that phase, that move to acting head, how that felt, and what some of your first priorities were?
Yeah, so I think part of me was wondering whether there would be an opportunity for me to be the acting head, because I'd actually shut the school down in the summer. So
Right.
the substantive head was poorly in the last few weeks of term. So I got my year 6 classroom ready, because I was going to be a 2-day-a-week year 6 teacher in my deputy role, at the same time as just going onto the key and just downloading the jobs for a head teacher in the autumn term, because I just had this funny feeling that I might need them, but also didn't want to overstep the mark, because
No.
that's what you've got to really hold as a deputy, that that your whole job as a deputy head teacher is to support the head at all times. And I thought, actually, if she's been poorly, then I would need to be able to assist. So actually knowing what's going on in the autumn term would be good anyway, even if I wasn't going to have that opportunity. But when the phone call came, I was a bit like, oh my goodness, it's here. I'm answering the call, and then I was like straight on the phone to you afterwards, saying, obviously this has happened. So I felt a mixture of relief that I knew what I was doing, and also I did panic at first. I'm not going to pretend that I was all like, oh, hooray, what a great challenge, because there was a sense of that whole, okay, it's you in September, and I knew what we had to do as a school, because I've been part of the discussions from Easter onwards of with all of our stakeholders and with the local authority, of what the school needed to do to improve. So I knew what we were doing and going to have to do. The other thing that I was a bit when I kind of like said, yes, I'll do that, I'll do it, I'll become the acting head, was thinking that we had quite a big change of staff as well coming in the September. Lots of new teachers, new early career teachers. So we had 3 ECT year 1s joining our team, an experienced teacher joining our team full-time, an experienced teacher joining our team part-time. So there's a lot of change. So in that moment, I was kind of like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it really well from the first day, and kind of treat it like an opportunity and also an interview. So for me, I was being interviewed for the headship from day one, whether or not it came, because at some point I didn't think it at that time, but I thought, actually, this is the opportunity that I've got to decide whether I can do this well enough to
I
want to be
suppose
a
that's
head.
right. And whether that would be in that current school, because at that time there was that enormous amount of uncertainty, and it may well have been that that there would never have been that opportunity to do that role there, or certainly not for a number of years. But that's your then thinking, right? Okay, do I want to go on and be a head either here or somewhere else? That's your sort of trial to see what you can do in a way that you would normally be doing as a deputy, going towards your first headship, I guess. But you were actually having the opportunity to do that as an acting head.
And I was really grateful for the belief in me, because obviously I'd only just gone back into the deputy head role, even though I'd had 7 years of being a deputy previously
Yeah.
under a couple of different head teachers. But it was the whole. I remember sitting with you in the office saying, "Okay, we're doing this. Let's talk about what we've got to do." And then the local authority coming in to check quite quickly as to whether they needed to bring somebody else
Yeah.
in. And I was like, "They're not. I'm going to make sure that they don't need to do that." So
Yes.
I was thinking, what do I need to put in place, because the school had so much change and
Yeah.
uncertainty that they knew, at least they knew me.
Yeah.
Whether or not we knew I could do the job, I knew I could lead, but I didn't know if I had everything that I needed to be a head teacher. And I don't think you ever do have it.
And that's
Or
really interesting. That I was going to come back to that bit, because it is difficult, isn't it, for a school? I know when I, as a head, was off sick for some time, that was really difficult for my school, and I think difficult for the deputies who had to step up at that time. And but probably better for my school that it was the deputies who were stepping up. And the same in this case, you felt that it was better for the school that it was someone that they knew who was stepping up, rather than somebody coming in from the outside who maybe had more experience.
yeah, and they all said that was what they felt as well. So we did have a not a it's up to you staff conversation,
Mm,
but actually trying to gather their views of
yeah.
how they felt about me leading them. And I guess I'd just been through a senior leadership appointment in the last in the
Yes.
7 weeks beforehand, which is again quite a rigorous process that I'd been through. So I think we were sure that I could lead, and I knew the priorities of the school, and I knew the SDP that we'd already set in motion. I knew the targets that we'd got on our plan to rapidly improve teaching and learning. So
Okay.
I just got on
So
with it.
you knew those roles, and of course did an absolutely brilliant job of that. And that's proven, that that's backed up by the local authority. It's backed up if we, and again, differences of opinions of how much notice we take of Ofsted and so on. However, certainly lots of evidence there to say, staff surveys, parent surveys, popularity of the school, to say you did a good job as acting head. So what advice would you give to anybody, any deputies new or long-standing, or anybody who finds themselves in that acting head's position? Because it is really hard. I know of the acting heads when I was off sick, that was really tough for them. And I know subsequently they wanted to do their best for the school, and I know that they weren't necessarily wanting to be in that seat. But what would you say to anybody finding themselves in that acting head's position?
So I think the first thing I had to come to terms with, that at that moment, in that, for however long it was, it became my school.
Hmm.
So although it was in an acting capacity, there was nobody else that was making the decisions. So I think it was that it's become your school, and there's some things that just can't wait. So if I'd have said, actually, I'm just going to let things tick along for just until we know what's happening, actually the rapid improvement that we managed to secure over the year, that until Ofsted and beyond, actually wouldn't have happened. So I think the first thing was that there's some things that can't wait. So just know that you've been put in that place, and your first job is to get on with those things that can't wait. But then what I did was I was open and honest with those people around me, so the local authority and the governing body and the staff and the parents and the children, with what we were doing and why. So it's like, this can't wait. So actually,
Yeah.
the changes that I want to make to the curriculum, they have to come in from day one, so they can't wait. We're doing this, so acting on those things that can't wait. And if you're not sure, if you're taking on a acting head role in a school that you don't know very well, find out what the things are that can't wait. So that would be my first bit of advice. And acting on any feedback you're given really quickly. So kind of, I guess, stepping into those shoes and thinking I might be in these for a little while and then return them, but actually I might be in them for longer than I thought. So and I think I can't remember if I said it to you, but I always said I'm going to leave the school in a better place than I picked it up. So I think even if you're picking up an outstanding school, schools can keep improving. So pick it up and say, I'm going to leave this jersey, the head teacher chair, if you will, in a better place than I picked it up in. And I really valued other pairs of eyes looking in. And I think sometimes you can feel like it's because you're an acting head or an interim head and therefore you don't know what you're doing. But actually, those other pairs of eyes can sometimes spot things you haven't had time to see yet because you're very early in your headship, or you just can't be everywhere at once. I do try, but you can't be everywhere at once. And so a couple of other things that I did was I downloaded the task for head teachers from the Key, which was really, really useful. So I'm sure there's other places you can get it, not just the Key, but that's where I knew we had a school subscription. So I went there so I could look through the autumn term tasks and start plotting them out. Take ownership as well, so things don't tick along. And the last thing that I did that I would recommend for someone else is find a head friend in the local area who can text you when things need doing. So I missed the tables checking exercise for the Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 data. Luckily, there were no problems with it, but I'd missed it because it was very early on in September. The email had gone to the head's account and I'd missed it because I had mine and the head teacher's emails all coming into the same place. And I said, one of my friends said, "Oh, have you done your tables checking exercise? It was due 2 weeks ago on Friday." And I was like, "Thank you. No, I haven't." 2 weeks ago on Friday is no good in telling me now. And so I just said, "You text me every time you're doing something. I want you to text me until I'm into it." So I'd find somebody that can do, or the local authority. I also told them, I said, "I missed this. Can somebody just make sure that I've got the dates that I need?" So they put me on a course as well that helped. So I think asking for help is not a weakness; it's actually a professional strength.
So there's loads there that's really, really interesting, Bex. And I think that point about embracing the idea that you are new to this, that asking for help's fine, and getting help with some of those practical things like the dates is really interesting. You also talked, if I can just take you back a little bit, you talked about the immense level of sensitivity that's needed and that you used, because you are wearing these shoes, but at the moment they aren't your shoes permanently. Really bizarre metaphor there, I apologise, but it is still somebody else's school, but you've got that job that you need to do at that time, and that sort of uncertainty is difficult, and that continual want to drive the school and improve it and keep everybody safe and everybody happy, but knowing actually, no, this is somebody else's school, this is somebody else's role, who is quite likely to come back to it, must be quite a challenge as well. But again, one that you managed beautifully, Bex.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was difficult, but I think I knew where we were going. We, as a leadership team, we'd had some conversations in the term where I was a deputy, and I knew the school so well that I knew what needed to do. And I thought, actually, the best thing I can do for the head that's poorly is to leave it in a better place.
And again, done so beautifully and so respectfully. Thank you. So you then moved forward a little bit from that. That time's moved on and reached the point where, sort of best part of a year down the line, almost, you're then in a position now where you've got to apply for the job that you've been doing for the best part of a year. How did that feel to go, okay, now there are other people that could be coming in and applying for this job that actually I've been doing? How did that feel, I wonder? having to apply for almost your own job, but it wasn't your own job. You know what I mean, don't you? Then
Yeah, completely. So I felt a big amount of pressure from the staff and the parents. I couldn't go in the playground for a few weeks beforehand because they were just like, "Come on, you need to get this," and you're like, "Okay," but there might be someone better. And I think what I had to do is think, I've done everything I can to give the panel a really difficult job in not selecting me. I thought I've led the school through an Ofsted. I've led the school from like high level of involvement of the local authority to not as much support from the local authority. And I've built a good team of staff, a good, excellent relationships with parents and carers and governors. And I just thought I've made it as hard as I can for them. And now it's it's the time that I've got to now prove to myself and everybody else that I'm the right choice. And so I think first of all, I felt pressure. On the day the 1.5 days of the interview, there was a lot of emotion. Luckily, the panel chose for me to do a presentation to the staff, which is very strange, about how I'd lead the school forward. And at the end of that, I was just like, I was done. I was like, oh my goodness. But I think it really helped me because I knew that not only that I had what it took to be a head teacher, but that I was the right choice. And the more I went through the day, I thought, I'm having this. Sorry, other candidates, but it has become my school. So I got my fight out after feeling the pressure and then going through the really emotional, I can't do this stage. I was like, you've done everything you can up until this point.
So that's really interesting to hear. Sorry, Bex. Sorry, keep going.
You go.
No,
I was just going to say, I treated every day like, I think I said it earlier, just made sure I treated every day from the time that we decided, yes, I was going to be the acting head. I just made sure that every day was like an interview for me.
That's really interesting. So every day been an interview either for that post that you have ended up getting or potentially for another headship post where you could prove that if that had ended up being in a different school, if it hadn't been the case. That roller coaster of emotion is really interesting, and keeping that positive and keeping that so that you're really trying to prove yourself is something that sort of came through from what I was hearing from you then.
Yeah, definitely. And I said to everybody, like, if I don't get it, I know that I've put everything that I possibly can into showing that I'm the right candidate for the job. And actually it was that kept me going, that whole positive nature of, I've got all of this evidence, but actually it could have been just a learning experience for me that might have led me somewhere else. And I really believe that you're always in the right place at the right time. So if the door had closed, then I was certain that another would have opened somewhere else. We had quite a bubbly school improvement advisor who I think might have helped me to find the right place.
So again, that's really interesting. You know how much you'd proved yourself over that year, and if it hadn't been that particular school, like you say, had the head come back, or had that post not arisen, or had somebody else come out of the woodwork, you've kept yourself really pragmatic, a really sort of pragmatic view that you would then be ahead somewhere else instead. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah, definitely. And that's what my acting deputy kept saying. It's like, well, if you're not going to get it here, you'll be off somewhere else, won't you? And I was like, yeah, actually.
Yeah.
And that's what I kept saying to everybody else, that actually what I wanted was the right person to lead them forwards. And if that wasn't me, then there'd be someone even better. So I said, however great you think I am to the staff, but it will be somebody that's even more capable of doing this job and taking our school forwards.
Okay. But everything seemed to then sort of all come together. You had, really, really won the hearts and minds of the staff, of the parents. You've obviously got this long history with the school as well. And everything then sort of gelled and fell into place, and you become the substantive head teacher. So thinking about that head teacher part, thinking about you as Rebecca Owen, head teacher at Little Paxton, what have been some of the best bits?
Oh my goodness! Like I made some notes on the things that we said we're gonna chat about, and there were so many best bits. I think definitely building the team, because it was a new team. So as an acting head, to come into a team that you're having to get the opportunity to shape a little bit was really, it was, I felt a real privilege, and not every acting head gets that. So to have such a new team, to kind of, lots of people who don't even know what life was like previously,
Yeah.
and you're like, well, this is what it's like at the moment, don't you
Yeah.
know, and this is where we're going. So I think building team, definitely. I think that although the Ofsted inspection was day that we got our good was absolutely brilliant, for me the most important day was the most significant day was the day that we got released from the high level of support by the local authority. That was the moment that I realised, you know, I'm actually made for headship, and I didn't think I was. But look what we've achieved. That was, it was, I think that everyone used the words immense. It was an immense moment for everybody. I think everyone was quite emotional on the call. And we got praise from one of the guys from the local authority who doesn't do that lightly. So I was like, yes. And so I think for me, that was one of the most significant moments. And now it's kind of seeing the magic and the joy coming back into the school, because now we've got the, you know, the good badge, whether however much we take of what that means. Because I think a school's only as good as the people in there, not always about the label. But actually,
totally.
we can now take some risks. We can now dream a bit more. We can now look at our curriculum and embellish it. We've got that room and that space to be a bit more creative, because we had to drive without taking the wheel off the driving standards forward. But at the moment I took over in September, we knew it was teaching and learning, and it was the curriculum that had to rapidly come together. So I think that those have been some great bits, and the children have been, they were so funny when on the interview days, because they kept forgetting to like ask me the questions. They were taking the other candidates around and asking them all these questions. I was like, do you want to know my answers? And they're like, no, you are our head teacher. I'm like, okay, but I've got to do this and you have to ask me, so come back over here and talk to me, please. But I think they've become, they're such a great bunch of children. Well, we're so privileged to have such great children in our school. So I think seeing them really settle, I think there's been a period of real restoration for the school, that's and now the kind of sparkle that it had is back, which is great.
And that's a sparkle that you've seen over many years, over history, because, you know, your history goes back to when you were a pupil there yourself. And, you know, you talk about the current pupils and how amazing they are. Lots and lots of highs there. And again, I'm really pleased that you've summarised some of your great successes as a head, because, you know, headship is a hugely challenging job, and there's a lot of things there proven behind you, some really great successes. What have been some of the biggest challenges, and what's helped you? I know you've alluded to some of the things that have helped you, like other local heads and some people from the local authority, but what about those challenges, and what have, you know, who has helped you?
So the first thing was, one of the challenges was getting that new team working together really quickly and really effectively, because when I started in the acting role, it was January 24 at the latest that we'd be inspected.
Right.
So it was like, actually, we have to get a move on. There can't
Yeah.
be any like monitoring and following up things that hadn't been as embedded as we wanted them to. We'd kind of started them at Easter, but they needed that time to gather the evidence. So I think that new team, I was actually the only DSL left in school in September. That was probably my biggest
Crikey. Yes.
challenge,
Yeah.
because it was just me. We couldn't get somebody trained more quickly. So actually we got the support of another local school to
Right.
help us. So that was one of the things. It's finding out where you can get the support from if you don't have it yourself.
Yeah.
Training very new teachers. So I had 4 ECT year ones. Well, I have 4 ECT year ones. I had 3 at the beginning of the year, and that creates timetabling challenges, because they need
Yeah.
10% release time on top of their PPA, plus they need mentoring. Then you need mentors who are established in the school, and therefore there was a bit of everyone was quite tired at the end of last year, but it's last academic year. So I think they were my biggest challenges. And I think one of the things that really helped me was that transparency. I think I say it to you quite a lot, and you say it to me. So being really transparent and really clear. Try not to. I'm quite a fluffy person. I can talk, as you've probably all noticed. But that whole actually cutting away the fluff and being really clear and really precise in what you want to say to your stakeholders and your governors. And I think one of the things that we hadn't done very well was we weren't very open. So I think opening up the school again was really, really important. And I think that the other thing was we were kind of in a reactive time. So for quite a few years where we were putting out fires, but we weren't looking, where's the next one coming? And I'm going to sort it out before it even gets to a fire. So I can see it over there. I'm getting it first. So I think it was that being prepared, looking ahead, looking forward. And one of the big things for me was people were quite low with all the people that had left pre the summer. And lots of people, even though I would have said as part of the leadership team pre-September that we valued and appreciated everybody, but one of the things that I realised is they didn't want to be appreciated how we were appreciating them.
Okay, so that's really interesting.
So I did a little survey right at the beginning of the year and said, how do you like to feel appreciated? Because there's kind of like 5 main ways that people like to give and receive kind of love. So I did the same as appreciation, and I did a survey, and 95% of them wanted words. So they wanted either to be spoken to or written down. So and we were doing like grand gestures and giving them presents, and actually none of them cared about that. So I think for me it was building team where everyone felt seen, valued and encouraged and appreciated, and I now know how they do feel appreciated. So I've got a little list in my diary of each member of staff that they filled in a survey, and I can, if they've had a bad day, I can then go and get them their favourite crisp or their favourite chocolate bar and leave them a little note or give them a hug if that's all they need. So I think for me that was really, really key.
But you've taken the time to actually, and again, in a primary school, it's a fairly large primary school, a 2-form entry primary school, but you've talked about building team and actually really getting to know people as individuals and asking them what they want and responding to that rather than assuming, which sounds really simple. But when I think back to myself as a head and I wonder whether I always did that as well as I could, I think that's really fascinating, Bex. Thank you.
I put it on one of the leadership forums I'm a part of, and lots of people have asked for it. So I've shared it with quite a lot of other heads because they were like, how do I appreciate my team? And I said, well, do you know how they like to be appreciated? Because I said it was the key for me, finding out, because actually they liked little notes, and some of them like it publicly and some of them like it you going to speak to them privately. So I've tried lots of different things.
It sounds obvious. It makes so much sense, but I wonder how many heads, possibly more experienced than yourself, Bex. And, I know you can't equate experience with length of service, but how many people would necessarily have thought of that? And, lots and lots of really positives there, which sort of brings us, you've taken this yourself in the kind of direction that I was thinking of going next. And that's, what have you learned and what advice would you give yourself to any other heads, new or otherwise? What would you say? So your learning and your advice, really.
So they're I've kind of grouped it into one. I'm a note taker, so I have to make sure that I know what I'm going to say. So I think the first thing is that transparency. So the importance of transparency with all stakeholders. So parents, children, governors, staff, the local community. So I very much am like, if a parent shoots off one of those emails that they've written in the moment that they've been really cross, I just am like, message them and get them in, please, because I think I'm not playing email ping pong with you. So getting people in, talking about it, not letting it become a big issue. So I've said a lot to everybody. I was like, why are you dealing with that issue when it's bigger? You could have stopped that over here like this. And it's getting people into that swing, because when they're used to just like pretending it's not happening or waiting for it to be a massive forest fire before they deal with it. So I think that's that, dealing with things really quickly when they're little. One of them, this is one of my Maxine nuggets, is the using policies to support you, including the complaints policy that can support you as a head teacher. So, and I think I've learned that and used it quite a few times in my first kind of, I guess, since September, using the policies really well.
And policies are there; they are there to help you. As I know they can be really boring to look at in governor meeting after governor meeting, but they are there, aren't they, to help you? That's a really interesting one.
Yeah, and because you can see the words complaints policy and think, oh my goodness, complaints policy, but actually, it's even there to help you as a head teacher. So I think don't be scared of them. And I think building relationships are essential with everybody. And I talk a lot about with my leadership team of getting people into the growth quadrant, where you've got a really good relationship with them. So you've got high relationships, so you can really, really challenge them as well. So I talk about key relationships and communication. So I think I've learned about who to communicate with when, and who are the really important people to have in the room when you're making decisions. So there's some people that everybody will know their school and their staff. So I've got particular staff that if I want to do something, they're in the room, because they might not seem important, like if you're looking at your school hierarchy, but I know they're really important in the corridors and in the classrooms and in the staff room and in fronting parents. So I get them in the room. So I think I've been really good at knowing who the real key people are that influence in the school, apart from your leadership team, because they're not always the ones.
That's really interesting. That, I think, it continually keeps coming back to people, Bex, the things that I'm hearing, about being transparent, being open, being honest, speaking to people. I know we've talked about policies, but building relationships, getting those relationships in the growth quadrant, and then building that communication. It's, you have got the structures and systems and the policies, but that you talk so much about the people, knowing the people and knowing the strengths and knowing the movers and shakers. That's sort of what I'm hearing from you.
Yes, definitely. And I think the last kind of bit of thing I've learned is that you have to pick a really good deputy head. So we're going to be going through the process of getting a substantive deputy, but I had to pick an interim deputy or an acting deputy from my phase leaders. And I'd worked with one of them really closely for the last 3 years, and I was like, it's you. Let's see what you can do.
Okay.
So I think that was really important for me.
Yeah.
And then I think the only other kind of bit of advice was definitely being really welcoming and knowing that you set the culture for the school. So you can think, oh, it's everybody together, but no, it comes from you as the head. What you do will be multiplied throughout your building, and whether it's positive or negative. So make sure, if you are the person unlocking the gate at 7 and then locking up the gate at 6:05, everybody will think, I've got to stay all that time. So it's actually setting the culture, knowing what you want your school to look like, and then living it out yourself. So it's not just, this is how we are at Little Paxton. It's, this is how we are at Little Paxton. Here I am doing it. And then getting your leadership team to do the same, because then your teachers will do the same, then your children will do the same, then your parents will do the same. So I think it's that knowing that you should be the best. I feel that head teacher should be one of the best teachers, if not the best teacher in the building, and should be able to nip into classrooms. And I think people seeing you teach really helps. Well, that's what I've noticed anyway. People have said, oh, it's nice to see you up here. And I'm like, yep, here I am again.
Because
teaching, so
the name is in the title, isn't it?
Yeah, head teacher.
And, you talk about modelling those things, modelling the things that you want from others in your school, modelling the behaviours, modelling how we are with each other. and also modelling that great teaching as well, Bex, which, that's really interesting to hear that from you.
And I think I've had to have some difficult conversations with some of my team this year, but because I've got a relationship with them and I know what they need and how they need to hear it, that's what they get. And I took some advice. I think it was when I worked in the youth. I was worked in the as a youth leader, and they said write down on a piece of paper the thing you have to say. So you might say some other things, but what is the one thing you're going into this meeting or speaking to this person about with in terms of feedback that's actually going to shift things that you have to say, and make sure you say it, because otherwise you can just end up going in and talking, and actually the thing you want to say you don't say.
That's really interesting to get, so that you don't get derailed and go off task with all the other things that will come up, actually really getting that clarity of what the key message is.
Yeah, really
Bex,
important.
I've got a really good question. This is brilliant. And if anybody else has got any thoughts on this is great. Michelle says, how do you get your middle leaders to establish the required tone as well? So again, Michelle says, I think they often are the most influential in the leadership hierarchy. So how those middle leaders, for you, that's your phase leaders, isn't it? How do you get them to also establish that tone that's really required?
So I think obviously first of all, it's about knowing them and knowing their strengths and knowing the things they're really good at. And I do a lot of, I call it watch me, with me, cheer me on. So I get them to watch me do something, then we do it together, and then they do it and I watch them and give them feedback. So I kind of, so it's that kind of cycle of modelling, I guess. So, and I know one of my middle leaders particularly is excellent with families. Like, he's totally brilliant. The families love him. The children love him. He can diffuse the situation even if it's massive. So I'll often point families in the direction of him if they need somebody to talk to because they're upset, because he's really good at diffusing them. I've got another one who's amazing at data. Like, he would live and breathe and eat data if he could. So he gets a lot of the data things, and then he models data to the others that aren't as strong at data. Then the other one models how to deal with parents really effectively. So it's knowing their strengths and building them up in the terms of their strengths, but then supporting them in the areas they need to develop. So I think with my data friend, like, I'm like, okay, you need to be better with families. How are we going to do that? Okay, here's the first thing I want you to start doing. I want you to start doing the gate.
Really good. You're really talking there about using using their strengths, but also being practical as well about how they can grow those strengths in those other areas. Thank you, Bex. So finally, what now for your school and for you? Where next after this phenomenal year?
I think you're going to have a rest. Going to have a little rest over the summer. I think for me, I've been talking a lot to my governing body and my leadership team. I really want to set a really clear vision for where we're going, like a now vision, a few years' time, and also really dream about what we actually want for children by the time they leave us. So I think we've got a vision. We know that we want to teach children and make them be the best, help them to be the best they can be. But actually, we've got a lot of different kind of vision catchphrases and mottos and slogans, and I don't really think everybody knows what they all mean. I had to admit at my interview I don't know what some of them mean. So I think it's
really interesting. So stripping that back and creating clarity on your vision.
Yeah. And I said that there's two other things that I'd love to achieve with the school. The first thing is I want to review our curriculum and start taking some risks, making it a bit more, adding in a bit more enrichment in terms of our personal development. That's one of our AFIs from Ofsted, because both the AFIs, the lead inspector is basically saying, I think your school could be outstanding. So I'm positioning you to move towards outstanding, which is lovely to hear from a school that was an RI school not long ago. So I think that taking some risks. So we're looking at moving to an A and B curriculum cycle, so we can take away some of the pressure of people feeling they're in the grind because they've got to get everything done in 1 year.
Yeah.
And then the kind of the next two things is one is not a selfish thing, but is I always talk to my team about putting their oxygen mask on first before they try and
Yes,
help other people.
totally.
And I need to start taking my dedicated headship time. The
Yes.
reason I haven't been taking it is because the school needed restoration, and it needed a really visible, it needed me to be really visible and approachable at that time. So I know that it's needed that this year, and I'm going to need to kind of start stepping that back and letting others step into those gaps, because I haven't created as many as because the school needed to come together. And my deputy keeps challenging me about that, which is really good, because that's what his job. He should be challenging me to say, where are you getting your rest? Where are you getting refreshed? And the other thing that I really want for our school is I'm going to try something a bit different with line management. So I'm going to be looking at our team and thinking, who are the key people in every role? Going all the way from I'll take my deputy, but all the way to kind of like through to my office team, my support staff team. Who are the really key people? I'm going to line manage a cross section next year, just to try something a little bit different. So keeping those people, like, so I know how the feeling from the LSA team, because I'm line managing that person, so I'm seeing them more.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I've kind of told a few people. So if there's any of you listening, then guess what? Surprise! But I've told most. I've got.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, you did. There you go. So I think I think we want to take some risks next year.
And I think that's really interesting. When I spoke to Alice Gregson 6 weeks or so ago, hearing about talking about some of the best leaders are ones who find that balance between risk and being courageous. That's really interesting to hear, and it's really fascinating to hear you talk about vision, and then having the time that you're going to give yourself, not just for your own well-being, but also that will enable you to be more strategic and get everybody doing those roles, which just sounds like it encompasses so much about great leadership. Bex, thank you.
No problem.
Bex, it has been an absolute joy for you to be here to talk to you tonight. Claire, thank you again. She's just noted enjoying listening to you both from North Wales, especially about relationships and knowing people as individuals. Love the cross-sectional line management. Yes, me too. I hadn't commented on that. That's really, really interesting. And again, different, innovative, and you've positioned yourself so well that you can now do those things, Bex.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited about it. But I think we've got a training day coming up after half term where we're going to talk about the curriculum and how we're going to use our support staff better and more effectively next year. So I think it's having a go, being a bit courageous, but not being silly at the same time. So
that's all finding that balance, the things that all primary schools have to do, or all schools have to do, but really, well done and congratulations on that courageous step going forward, and all the best with that. I look forward to seeing that journey, and congratulations again on your immense success over the last 12 months. And thank you so much for joining us this evening, Bex. It's been a real joy. Thank you.
Thanks ever so much. It's been really lovely. It's been a great opportunity to reflect on the year, because I haven't really had the chance to stop and do that. So thank you very much.
And I'm pleased that you have, and I'm pleased that you can see those positives. Thank you. Thank you so much to Bex there for joining us, giving up her Friday evening during half term. How exciting to hear about a school leader and that journey and that passion for education and making their school even better. Particularly, just take you back to the beginning of the conversation with Bex, when we're talking about the school that she actually attended herself as a child. Brilliant, and thank you so much to Bex. We're going to go over to the news this evening. Bex, thank you for your message there. So glad to be with you all. Absolutely amazing to have you with us. Thank you again. And back to our sponsors and over to the news.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MATS leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
According to FE Week, Sir Ian Buckham, the interim head of exams regulator Ofqual, is Gillian Keegan's preferred candidate to take on the role permanently. The role of chief regulator will only be confirmed by whoever forms the next government. The current Education Secretary chose to appoint an interim chief regulator for a year after Dr. Joe Saxton stepped down to head up UCAS. Sir Ian began the role in January and Ms Keegan has put him forward for the full-time role, following approval from the Prime Minister. However, Sir Ian's pre-appointment hearing with the Parliamentary Education Committee will not take place until after the recently announced general election on July the 4th. It leaves a potential new government facing the decision on whether to keep the current Conservative-approved candidate or find an alternative. The Indian Business Standard News website explores the reasons for a drop in numbers of Indian students choosing the UK as their higher education destination. 21,000 fewer master's degree applicants have registered than in previous years, according to official figures. Anuj Gupta, CEO of Young Rads, said that Indian students are now hesitant to apply due to stricter visa regulations. Gupta went on to point out the financial impact this could have on UK institutions, as they rely heavily on tuition from international students. The article goes on to suggest that the British government has prioritised curbing migration over university student numbers. The article goes on to point out that many Indian students are now considering countries like Germany, which offers a combination of world-class universities, minimal tuition fees and a low visa rejection rate. In Wales, the BBC reports again on measures some head teachers are taking to save cash as budget squeezes continue. A primary head teacher in Pembrokeshire is reported to be moonlighting as his school's caretaker, seeing to day-to-day maintenance, testing fire alarms and water hygiene, alongside teaching and headship itself. Many other schools are responding by cutting jobs. According to the report, the Welsh Government said its budget was £700 million less in real terms than when it was set by the UK Government in 2021. Councils have confirmed to BBC Wales News that nearly 200 schools have been discussing redundancies in 2024, with cuts largely directed to welfare and support services in schools. The BBC also reports on an open letter sent by head teachers from schools across St Albans to parents. The letter calls on parents not to let their children have a smartphone before they are 14. St Albans Primary Schools Consortium urged parents to wait until Year 9 at secondary school before giving them a device. In it, the letter talks of how the devices could expose children to a number of risks. and that whilst it was understandable that phones could give parents peace of mind, children's phones do not need to have access to the internet in order for you to keep them safe. TeacherTapp's survey tool published data last January that suggested only 1% of schools had no restrictions in place at all on phones in schools. But the topic remains a cause for concern, especially as smartphones are now a feature of daily life for most adults, and that some children as young as year 1 have access to such a device. Finally, a West Yorkshire MP is calling for children to be taught about endometriosis in schools. The condition, which can cause chronic pain, affects about 1.5 million women in the UK, according to figures from charity Endometriosis UK. MP Sir Alex Shelbrooke said he had been shocked by the lack of education surrounding the condition. The Department for Education said new RSHE curriculum proposals included the addition of lessons on menstrual and gynecological health, including endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, and heavy menstrual bleeding. Sir Alex said both girls and boys should learn about all aspects of reproductive health. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Great to come back after the news there. Just hearing Bex talking about modelling all of the jobs and modelling how to be and things about your school culture. I don't think she would want to stretch that as far as carrying out some of the caretaker's jobs. So really difficult to hear there about some of those immense budget challenges that schools are making. So back to thinking about head teachers being ahead and thinking about that advice for new and aspiring heads. And I hope if there are any people any deputies who are thinking that they might find themselves in an acting head position, or any aspiring or new heads, or even more experienced, longer serving heads who listen back to this. There's been loads and loads there from Bex that I think you can take about getting to know your team, about building relationships, about listening, and just like a little practical thing about asking people how they want to be recognised. How much do we assume that people are going to like to be treated the way that we like to be treated? And I know you can take that so far, but actually not assuming, actually getting that clarity and finding out, I think has such value. So an enormous thank you to Bex for being a brilliant head teacher and an absolutely top quality guest. So I just want to come back again just to round up the last few minutes of the show to talk about any bits of advice for new and aspiring heads, any last sort of thoughts. And some of these are my own thoughts, and some of these are ones that I've gleaned from other writers and from people who've written various things about headship and bits of advice. So these are my thoughts. So number one, and I talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago, make a priority getting to know yourself. And if you develop your own self-awareness, the better you know yourself and your strengths and your thoughts and your areas for development, what you find difficult, the more you know that, the more you can make sure you have a plan to address those sorts of areas, those areas where you're going to find things challenging. It might also help you build your team. You know, Bex talked about in her team building so that she's got different skills that bounce off each other within the team, and how that also plays with her own skills. But that's really important, knowing yourself and then knowing how to build your team around you so that you can then, any strengths that you don't have, you can find them in other people. But also, I think that idea about yourself, about knowing how you're going to be able to tell when you're stressed, knowing how you're going to know when your energy is depleted, and knowing how best to re-energize yourself, knowing those things. If you know that you are an introvert and you know that too much peopling absolutely wipes you out, then at least know that, and you can then better look after yourself. So that's my number one. Know yourself. Knowing what you need, knowing what helps, and allowing yourself to follow that, I think is really, really important. So that's number one, is about yourself. Number two, Know and be really clear about to yourself the culture that you want to create. Create real clarity about exactly what you want the culture in your school to be. So if you think about school culture as the sort of guiding beliefs and values that are evident in the way a school operates, all those attitudes and behaviours and values, then really think carefully about what you want that to be. So Bennett, in his work, Design the School Culture You Want to See, says that culture requires deliberate creation. A key role of leadership is to design a detailed vision of what culture should look like for that school, focusing on social and academic conduct. And those expectations must be as high as possible for all. So not just students, but think about, what do you want every member of your school community? What do you want all of your staff? What do you want your leaders to be like? How are we going to be with each other? Know it, have clarity, and then, of course, model it, live it, like Beck says. Beck's talked about that a lot. How you want other people to be in your team, that's what you as a leader need to model with them. But being really clear about it, that for me is number 2. Number 3 is about vision, and take time to develop that clear vision. So I was really pleased to hear that Bex is going to take some more time out for her dedicated headship time, not just for her own well-being, but also so that she's got the time and space to develop that clear vision, and this being a priority for the school as well. Getting buy-in for that, listening to others in formulating the vision, but ultimately, as a head, and you will have to work with governors on this, it's your role to really build that vision and to articulate it, to be able to describe it, be able to make that really clear to all sorts of different audiences. So that vision is number 3. Number 4 for me, and these are in no particular order, is about listening. Really listening. So I often think within communication, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And the biggest part of communication is listening. Listening to what's said, and listening also to what isn't said. Thinking about the body language. How do people say things? What is it? And not making assumptions and reading into things, but so stripping back from that, but really hearing what people are saying, asking those questions and not assuming that people are saying what we think they're saying, or not assuming that they're saying what we want to hear, but being really clear about that. So the first part of relationships, the first part of communication is all about listening, creating opportunities when you can listen to people, and then listening really clearly. Next, after that, number 5, I think about being clear and communicating that culture and vision, and having clarity and making that as simple and as clear, and making your communication of that as effective and as possible for people to understand as you absolutely can. And then coming with that, it's really important for leaders to challenge anywhere where culture's undermined. So anybody, once you've set that culture, once you've got that buy-in, once you've got that agreement, this is how we're going to be with each other. Anyone who's not behaving in line with that, really challenge it nicely, kindly, but firmly. And don't let little things slip and turn into big things that would then in future massively undermine that culture. Next is to think about the strategy. So you've got the big vision, you know how things want to be. Now break that, take time, take support, use models, use systems, structures, use other people to help you turn that vision into a really clear strategy that will turn that vision into reality. Take the time to do that. Give yourself the space and the headspace. Don't get too caught up in the day-to-day. Other people are there to do that and to do a lot of that running the school. I know being clear and being visible is really important, and that's coming next, but that whole focus on creating and developing a strategy so that you can turn that vision into reality is really important. Next comes authenticity. You will not flourish and as a leader, and you will really struggle if you're not you, if you're wearing a mask that's not you as a human being. So be authentic, be who you are. And it comes back to that first one about knowing who you are, because before you can be who you are, you need to have real clarity on who you are. What sort of person are you? What really drives you? what are you as a human being? And you're not just you as head teacher or acting head teacher or aspiring head teacher, or you as deputy head teacher, you as the human being you. And I love the quote that Alice Gregson shared when I spoke to her a few weeks back. Alice Gregson, the CEO of Forum Strategy, talking about vulnerability and talking about what makes great leaders. She shared a quote from Sir Steve Lancashire. And she says, he said, me being me means you can be you. So if we can celebrate our authentic selves as leaders, we send such a powerful message to our organisation. And that leads us on to that sort of idea about vulnerability. Vulnerability is about opening up, sharing our stories, sometimes facing what's uncomfortable, but it's about letting people in and showing what makes us who we are. May include our weaknesses and fears, but it also includes things like our beliefs, our feelings, our desires, our aspirations and experiences. And vulnerability as a leader is about letting people know you, the full you. And again, that is really important in what Bex was talking about building connection. Again, coming back to some of the advice from Alice Gregson from a few weeks back, don't do it all yourself. The best leaders do the things that only the leader can do. Delegate, empower, and provide accountability. And finally, number 10, and again, I said no particular order, but I think this is really important at the sort of top of the pile here. Enjoy it. Take time to notice things that are going well. Write them down, record them, keep in mind everything that's going well, because your negative bias will be fighting that. And that's really important that you fight that back and take time to enjoy it. Notice these things that are going really, really well. I'm going to go just to our advertisers for one last time before I summarise and end the show.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MATS leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
Really great to hear from our sponsors there. So just a couple of last points for me. First of all, a couple of really good shows that are coming up. Tomorrow night, Saturday, Twilight show with Graham Stanley, minimal preparation teaching. That sounds like a real winner to me. That sounds like something very, very, very positive. And even bigger than that, Monday the 3rd of June, 7:30, Tom Rogers, in collaboration with Teaching How-Tos, will be asking, is AI in education elevating practice or just saving time? And that's the link for that on YouTube. I think that sounds really fascinating. Is AI really making education better, or is it just time saving? Probably has a value as time saving, but how is it elevating practice? Don't miss the weekly review as well on Sunday at 10 a.m. Brilliant show. Always really good discussion things. So coming back to that final point about number 10, headship, enjoy it. Take time to notice the things that's going well, write them down, record them, keep them in mind, and also keep coming back to your purpose, your why are you doing this? Again, those points, successes, keep them at the forefront of your mind. Headship is a wonderful job. That's a really important. It's such a privilege. And I just want to take this moment just to thank the school leaders I've spoken to. Monique a couple of weeks ago, in my previous show about headship, and Bex this evening, who again has done, both of whom have done such a super job with their schools. And I wish them and their schools all the very best for 2024, 2025 and beyond. Two great schools, different contexts, but both on journeys, and both have leaders with huge hearts, clear people-centered vision, and sort of immense levels of care for pupils and, for most importantly, their staff, and doing such a great job. I also finally, before I sign off this evening, want to say a huge thank you to the Teachers Talk Radio team. This is going to be my last show for a while, as I'm taking a break for a few months from Teachers Talk Radio. I shall still be listening, and I'll still be checking in and watching and listening to as much as I can, and taking part in Teachers Talk Radio, but from afar. The Teachers Talk Radio team, led by Tom Rogers, is such a brilliant example of a supportive organisation with a positive culture, a culture that helps us all to work together, that supports us, that supports where we've got areas such as, myself with technology, where things don't always go well. I just think that culture is so strong. And, one of my things I'm passionate about schools and about school leadership is how we model that. And, huge thank you to you, Tom, for as our person at the top of Teachers Talk Radio, for modeling that so beautifully. So I'd like to say thank you to everybody who has listened live, and everybody also who's listening on download. I hope you all are too. Thank you so much for listening. It's been a huge privilege, and I will be back. But taking a break for now. Have a fantastic evening if you're listening live, and have a great day, or whatever it is you're doing if you're listening to the podcast. Take care and goodbye.